Welcome back to Stitt Happens. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn. For years, the solar industry pushed one message: go big, offset 100% of your energy, get those tax credits. But that playbook is changing. Federal credits have expired, net metering laws have shifted, and honestly, the old approach needed an update. Today, David Stitt breaks down a completely new strategy that Stitt Solar is rolling out for residents, businesses, and anyone paying an electric bill in Northwest Arkansas. We're talking smaller systems, better economics, and why the sun might be the most reliable energy source you're not fully tapping into yet. David, welcome back to the show.
Great seeing you. Great to be back, jumping back into this ever-changing conversation.
Oh my gosh, it really does do that. And it's so funny because every day there seems to be something in the news about fossil fuels, about alternative sources of energy. And so, I mean, this topic is never going away, I don't think. And anytime that we have to buy gas or pay for our electric bill or our gas bill or any type of heating bill, air condition, it's always going to be a top of mind issue. And so I'm glad that we're having a chance to kind of dive into this subject matter, which you know so well. Lately, David, you've been sharing a pretty bold message. You said, and I quote, that you might actually fight bringing back the federal solar tax credits. Now, that's some pretty controversial statements coming from someone in the solar industry. Can you walk us through that thinking, that mindset that has you in a place now where you are saying that the solar tax credits might be heresy?
Yeah. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and my grandfather was a pretty independent guy. And I remember him often saying, thank goodness we don't get as much government as we pay for. And, I believe in my heart that government serves a very, very important role in so many aspects of our life. But having said that, private market can move much more quickly, be much more nimble. And there's a purity about the marketplace working. And that is to sort of deny potential government assistance. Yeah, it doesn't sound right. But what we find is that the industry chases the incentive or the money. And when there's money involved, other people get into an industry that maybe shouldn't be there. That finance companies that don't really have an interest in solar but want to sell a whole bunch, lend a whole bunch of money, start doing things that aren't good for the system or the industry. So yeah, even as recent as last year, we saw the end of the residential investment tax credit. And so we saw our business go from a steady, good pace to a deadline that makes the ramping up and the ability to grow a business logically and consistently and effectively to grow the business on the benefits and just the hard work and the innovation of the industry will be a much healthier business in the future without the investment tax credits. And I do think that the investment tax credits played a role, and they were really there to jumpstart the system. But now that it's jumpstarted and people are running down the highway, let's let it roll. And I think the prices will settle in to where, in fact, we'll talk about this today, that the prices of what we're selling from an energy standpoint are competitive with the grid. So the tax credits aren't necessarily doing what they were intended to do at this time.
Yeah. No, and that whole boom bust cycle tied to federal tax credits, it's kind of nice that maybe if it goes away, then it creates more opportunity for a much more thoughtful approach to solar energy. So the credits, as you said, are gone really for residential, but you mentioned that on the commercial side, there's actually some confusion right now because I think the Treasury Department can't even define the rules. How is that affecting businesses that may want to consider solar as an option?
Yeah, it's a great point. So you're spot on. There's an investment tax credit for commercial that is still available. And last summer, when the big, beautiful bill passed, there were provisions that said if you're going to harvest tax credits in a commercial project, you need to use product that comes from companies or countries that were responsibly produced products, fair wages, labor standards, but then also come from countries that are not adversarial or of concern, which is the acronym is now FEOC, Foreign Entities of Concern. So there's a host of countries around the world that if you have product, be that panels, inverters, racking, that come from those countries, you cannot harvest a commercial investment tax credit. Now, having said that, there are products out in the marketplace today that we can provide that will allow a commercial entity to harvest the tax credits. Just have to make sure that it's the right products. Well, herein lies the problem. What's the product? What's the regulation? What percentage of the product? Because you can imagine an inverter or a solar panel or so many things in our life that come from all over the world. So what if some parts of that product are made in a country that is acceptable, but some are coming from a country that's not acceptable? So what percentage of product has to come from certain countries versus ones that are of concern? So that has certainly been a topic of discussion, and it's kind of interesting. We're working with suppliers and we get on the call and we're quoting a job or something. And it's almost the conversation on the phone call is almost funny because you want to say, like, okay, so is this product FIAC compliant? And maybe the vendor will say something or I'll say something back. And you can see we're both trying to see, do you understand what's going on? Or is it just me? And at some point it breaks down and we go, okay, we're all trying to figure this out. And Treasury is still defining some of those rules and regulations. So maybe by the time this airs, we'll have some clarity on that. But the timelines are well defined and we know what those are. And we work on the projects one at a time and navigate through it and make sure we've got some resources on the accounting and tax side that once we get to that point, we actually lean in on them and say, here's the product, here's the customer. We want to make sure that they can harvest the tax credits before they commit to the project because we understand that changes the economics of it for that particular customer. So, and I think those timelines are going to change and they're going to phase out. And, you know, all this said, and we talk about the uncertainty of this industry, there's a new administration that will come in someday. And we hope that there's some consistency going forward, no matter what happens.
Well, I mean, I want to kind of bring this conversation to our backyard here, and that backyard is Arkansas. And I want to talk specifically about what people are experiencing here on the ground. I know net metering used to be one to one. You could sell power back to the grid at the same price you bought it, but that's changed dramatically. David, can you maybe explain what happened and why that matters and why both individuals as well as businesses should be concerned about that?
Yeah, definitely ongoing conversation. And the thing I will say that I have to do sort of a brain check with myself and even our industry from time to time. I think we get caught up on net metering and investment tax credits and incentives sometimes more than the customer. Now, the incentives are certainly of value to all of us, but I think generally speaking, there are some customers that are really, really in touch, and some are just probably confused because we have a hard time keeping up with it. But I think the point I'm making is this goes back to this whole thing about this industry being innovative and not getting caught up in tax credits and utility rate changes all the time, because we're going to navigate through it no matter what happens. But yes, the law that governs how electrons flow back and forth across the meter has changed residentially and commercially. You buy it full retail, you sell it what's called avoided costs. It makes the investment in solar, the return on that investment, a little less than it once was. And kind of where you started, just the changes in the product and the process and what we sell, and I think we'll touch on that today, is changing because the investment profile looks different. But it's clean, it's readily available, and the thing I am most excited, almost to the point where I just come to the office in the morning and I'm excited about it, is we can now sell energy per kilowatt hour. And we'll talk through exactly how we do that. That's equal to maybe a touch more, but in most cases equal to or less than what you buy from the grid. So the economic proposal, not to mention all the other benefits from an environmental standpoint, risk mitigation, all these things, is a solid investment and it mitigates the future rising cost of energy. So net metering, all these things are, in our rearview mirror. They may change in the future, probably will, may come back and get better. But at this point, we've got a product and a price that's competitive with the grid.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad you're kind of breaking it down that way. I know that given all of these changes, you were also talking about how we should maybe look at this whole opportunity. And you've kind of highlighted this thing that you're calling the baseload revolution. And this is kind of a new strategy. And for someone who's never heard that term before, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, we sit around our office and we have these probably conversations that we think are pretty fun and most people would probably think are pretty weird and boring. But baseload, what's baseload? It's so intuitive to us and some people may or may not understand that. But we think about the baseload is the energy your home or business consumes almost on a regular basis, consistently throughout the day or night. It's not affected by heating and cooling. That would certainly be part of your utility bill, but it would be above your base load. So if you think about things like maybe a security camera or refrigerator, your router, maybe your computer's on all day. So these things that just sit there and draw energy all day long are your base load. And another way of thinking about base load is everything except heating and cooling. Because in most houses, a heating and cooling bill is a significant part of the utility bill. The other thing in base load typically is like a water heater if you have an electric water heater. But the way you can figure it pretty simply is if you'll take the October bill that someone has and then typically the April bill, those are 2 months of the year where you effectively have almost no heating and almost no cooling. So let's say you have a $100 electric bill. That's probably your base load in those 2 months. So if you take those 2 months and add them together and then divide by two, that's effectively your base load. And that's just one way of figuring it. But with the net metering thing, just to reiterate, it used to be you bought retail and you could sell back at retail. And people loved this notion that there was equity in that. Then when it went to buy retail, sell back at avoided cost, so you're maybe buying at 12 cents and selling at 2 cents. That feels really bad when you bought an electron, paid a bunch for it, sent it back across the grid at a huge loss to you, and then your neighbor effectively gets that electron and the utility charges them 12 cents. So that just feels bad. Well, when you get to a base load, if you produce an electron on your roof and you consume it, means you didn't have to buy it. Effectively, you still have a one-to-one, meaning you're offsetting your cost with what you produced one-to-one. So the economics of a one-to-one or covering your baseload are still incredibly good. It's just that you don't want to overproduce. You don't want to produce a whole bunch that goes across the meter at a loss. And that's where the big pivots come in this law was that it used to incentivize people to send a bunch back and bank it for other days. It just doesn't work that way anymore. So things like a battery or other strategies can be used if you decide you want to cover your base load and then some extra. But the base load is covered simply by putting an array on your roof, producing and avoiding what you have to buy from the utility company.
Yeah, I had a chance to listen to a talk that you did recently around this whole concept. And I know that you used another analogy, something about going to Sam's Club and buying $300 worth of food when you only need groceries for the week. And that resonated with me as somebody that's constantly asked by my wife to go out and do some grocery shopping. I'd love for you maybe to unpack that because one of the things that I do want to do for our listeners is to really simplify it for them so that they have a better understanding of how all of this applies to them, especially for those that are just starting to think about solar and solar energy options for them.
Yeah. And I'm going to kind of avoid going back to where it used to be because that's water under the bridge. But I love analogies because I think they tell part of the story. And the analogy of My wife and I have two kids and they're both gone. And so it's just the two of us. And so we buy a lot less food and we buy what we need. And we joke sometimes that if we run down to a wholesale club and buy a bunch of food, we're going to eat a little bit of it, but most of it's going to get spoiled and then it's just wasted. That's exactly what happens with the way solar is. If you oversize the system now, all the electrons that you produced and used are great, but all that stuff you sent back is just like throwing it in the garbage. Now, I came up with another little analogy. If you have a garden, because there's a sort of a parallel to producing something of value at home that you're in control of. Well, if you go out and plant a garden and you produce a tomato, you get to eat the tomato, but you don't have to go to the store and buy it. It's the same thing with solar. You produce the electron, you use it means you don't have to go buy it. So this whole idea of smaller systems and right sizing is really critical today. And this all was sort of born out of this almost a compulsion of doing something that I think people want to contribute. They want to be part of a movement, solving a problem. It's a human spirit. Like people just are animated and motivated to do stuff. And so we said, we believe in clean energy. We believe it avoids additional and increasing cost in the future. So what can we do today? And this is, let's build a smaller system. Let's get it on the house. It's compatible with current cost of energy, equal to or less in most cases. It allows people to do something, but it also, there's no harm done, meaning you're not doing anything by installing the system that can't be improved upon in the future. So we do the basics now, and then as utility rates change, maybe incentives come back or something changes, rates go up higher. We have done all the work to get the system up and running and started, and it's operational. And then we modify the system, add to it, make a battery, add a battery to it, so that you are very nimble and adjusting to what comes in the future.
Yeah.
They're not made on Saturday night or Sunday in the middle of a game. The hard work goes in before the season. So I feel like we're in this place where the industry's changed, but this is our off season. Let's do things now that set the stage or prime the pump, whatever you want to call it, that set us all up for success in the future. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah. I noticed in one of the talks that I listened to, you talked about different system sizes and you use that as a way to kind of explain to people how they might utilize the technology, how they might utilize solar in a different way and how to think about it. So when this whole concept of a baseload revolution, I never looked at it this way, right? I never separated it out. A lot of times people just think, well, I just use energy. I have energy costs, so they are what they are, right? I'm not going to separate out my HVAC costs from the cost for my wireless router or something along those lines. But you're saying that there are a number of different ways to look at the problem that we're trying to solve, which is to create a much more affordable energy infrastructure that doesn't impact the individual consumer as much as it has in the past.
Just to be clear, I think most people probably understand this, that when you produce energy on your home or business, it kind of goes into a big pool, right? Like it's then consumed by whatever needs it at that moment. And what we're really trying to focus on is what are we going to cover to the best of our ability with the information we have at that time and allow that system to run and avoid all this excess or putting back to the grid. But it does force people to start to think about where their energy is going, understanding their utility bill, and having some contribution to solving a problem. And I think two other little points that I think are motivating for us in this, and we just believe that if we're not successful unless our customers are successful. And even if someone puts on a solar system with someone else, a good reputable company, job well done. Like that's what this is about. And so we would rather see thousands and thousands of small systems go out because there's actually some energy equity. That's another term we've started using around here, that solar for years had been relatively expensive and not attainable by so many people. Well, now anyone that pays a utility bill can consider this as an option. And once that happens, now we start really moving and solving some problems at scale that thousands of smaller systems will have a greater impact than a few big systems. And that forces customers to, that's our tagline, shift the energy consumption paradigm where we live, work, and play. People are starting to think differently about how they consume energy and what consumes energy, to your point. Is it the fridge or the heat and air unit or the water heater? Those are things we've never had to think about before. But there's some empowerment in people producing something on their rooftop and consuming it, 20 feet from where it's produced.
And of course, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, as they listen to this and process the information that you're sharing, and even contemplate, what would a solar system look like for them? One of the biggest issues that comes into play, and I know you deal with this on a daily basis, is financing and the real numbers. How do people kind of, it sounds great. Yes, I want to get solar because I want to get off the grid as much as possible and not have as much reliance on fossil fuels and other sources of energy, and when I can be utilizing the sun, right? We talked about it right at the beginning. It's that one source that's always there. As long as we wake up every morning, we see that sunrise, we know it's there. Can we talk maybe just a little bit about how people need to build both individuals and businesses need to be thinking about how even they make these systems come to happen for them, what it costs, right? I mean, because that's at the end of the day, if we were just handing out solar arrays and people could just have them and strap them to their roof, we'd be great. That's perfect. But the reality is that there is a cost, there is a fundamental cost. And I think people do want to understand what are the real numbers attached to those costs.
Talk about the tip of the spear of this whole thing. A couple things that I think are worth mentioning. The first one, the whole world pays for energy on a monthly basis. And the rate you pay for, say, a kilowatt hour is so many cents per kilowatt hour. Well, the solar industry, for good reason, sells a project based on a total price. So let's just take a number. If I'm going to offset 100% of your utility bill, let's say it's 20,000 bucks. Well, the customer is forced to go, hey, wait. I'm paying 12 cents for my utility, but it's going to cost me 20 grand for the solar array. It doesn't play, right? It's hard to understand. So what we've had to do, and I think it's a great exercise to say we need to break this down into terms that are consistent and compatible with the other options. So we can take a system that costs a certain amount of money, whatever the size it is. We can say, here's what it costs to install it. But what I'm going to do is break that down into this system will produce a certain amount of energy over the course of a year. And then we say, what does it cost to own that system? And I can then take that to a price per kilowatt hour also. So I can say if the grid is 13 cents per kilowatt hour, your system will produce energy at 13 cents a kilowatt hour or 11 cents or 14 cents, whatever that is. So it levels the playing field. Now, the big problem is we talked about early on incentives and chasing the money. So many people got into solar and were more interested in loaning money as opposed to doing solar well. There were huge loans, big dealer fees, probably lots of commissions paid to a lot of, people shuffling paperwork to get financing done, that it inflated the cost of these systems. And I am so proud of our team that we avoid at all costs any dealer fees or any finance fees to our customers. We do get some customers say, I understand that based on the financing that they want to do, that there's an origination or a dealer fee. As long as they understand what it is and they accept it, that's certainly up to them. But we need to give them the options so that they get the best value for their investment. There's always a concern about, to your point, what's the real cost? So make a long story short, we will show our customers what the price of the system is installed. put it on paper. We'll do the return on the investment, the number of years it'll take to pay it off, what it costs, what the energy costs. Now we can give them the information that allows them to make an informed decision.
Yeah. Well, and again, that is always going to be at the top of mind for most people. And as you said earlier, it is easy to sell the financing or sell a system. That the hard part is servicing that system, right? In terms of making sure that things, and I kind of shared with you anecdotally one of the Facebook message areas that I was in when I saw somebody chatting about having a solar array on their home, but not having somebody available to service it. So it's one thing to buy it and spend all this huge investment up front and get all this terrific product, or maybe not a great product, depending on if you don't do your homework, you may end up with something that is inferior to some of the better items that are out there. And I'm sure you deal with that on a regular basis. How do you have that conversation with both commercial accounts as well as private individuals that maybe have purchased something that is really not up to snuff or not up to the industry standards that you have as an expectation at Stitt Solar?
Yeah. It's an interesting discussion. We do a lot of service work. We go out and troubleshoot when systems aren't working. Some of them are our systems, some of them are not. This just came out maybe 2 weeks ago. We are just doing a study within company systems that we're going out and servicing that we did not install. We're typically spending about twice as many hours, and the cost to get it going is somewhere around 30 or 40% higher. And it's simply because we're going out and saying, okay, this wasn't done to code, or this product was not properly installed. And that's not everyone. There's some of them that, we had a job where the breaker had just tripped. So some of these are real basic. But I think the point you're accentuating, which is super important, is if you buy a car, you need to have a good technician that can maintain the car. If you buy a heating and air system, you need to have a technician that understands full well how to maintain it and service the system so you get a life service out of it. And it's the same with the solar system. And remembering that solar is different in that it is producing a lot of energy and it's on your rooftop, and to do it right is incredibly important. And I'm proud of our team that are continually doing online trainings and becoming certified with different certifications that allow them to handle this next generation of systems that are coming.
And just to back up, because I don't want to leave this whole topic about financing, and the issue that a lot of people have is, well, where am I going to get the money to do this? And there are two partners that you've started working with and that you're familiar with. One is Figure and the other one is Easy Solar Loans. I believe one is tied to home equity and the other is more of a credit union option that is available to people. I would just love for you just to maybe just touch upon those two options as one way to consider how somebody may be able to introduce solar into their current home or business environment.
Yeah, I'm glad you're circling back to that because I think it's a huge part of it. And I'll go high and then come back down to the point. The first thing, we can get people right to the point of total cost and break that down to what does it cost per kilowatt hour so the customer can make a fair comparison to their other option, which would be the grid. Keeping in mind that the price per kilowatt hour is important, but there's usually also some other motivation in there. Maybe a commitment to helping solve environmental climate problems. It may be a predictability thing. It may be a battery and they want backup power. But the thing that we love about these two finance partners in particular is one, the customer can add a system with no money out of pocket. And we think that's important, particularly in this day and age where so many people, because of affordability, we hear it on the news and the rising cost of everything. Most people don't have a bunch of money sitting in their bank that they're willing to throw at something to sort of prepay for a bunch of energy. And so having a product that allows them to add a system without affecting their monthly budget is important. The second thing is, in both cases, Easy Solar is a credit union and does not have any origination fees. So there's no dealer fee, there's no big down payment or anything that's required. And then Figure, there's a small origination fee, but it's a home equity. It's a fintech company. And I think you get pre-approved in under 5 minutes and close in 5 days. And the nice thing that I personally like about the figure product is it ties the system, which is on the home, and they do commercial also, but it ties the production of energy to the building that is consuming it. And so, in the event the home or business sells, the second, the home equity line of credit is satisfied in the sales process because there's not a large origination or a dealer fee. The customer is not upside down on closing out that loan, meaning it doesn't affect the equity when they sell their home or business. And they can get some longer terms. So our numbers that we use, we kind of go on the high side. We say, let's assume this is going to be a higher rate and a shorter term. And if the customer can qualify for it and they want to go longer term, lower rate, then it just makes the cost of energy they're producing that much lower. So there's some great finance partners. It's like everything in life. There's some really great partners out there. And if you find them, they'll take care of you. That's the case here.
Yeah. Well, as a follow-up to that, have you run into situations where a potential client will come to you and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling my home. I have these solar panels, and we want to help highlight those for potential buyers so that they can have a better understanding about the value add that these solar panels offer." I'd love for you maybe just to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we do, but unfortunately, it's kind of the other way. We've had more people come in and say, "Can you remove the panels off my house because I need to sell it?" And the flag goes up in my head and I go, "Whoa, whoa, wait, stop. What are you thinking?" Well, someone told me, and I'm not throwing the real estate industry under the bus, but there's a gap of information there.
Hmm.
And it's totally justified because there have been systems installed on houses that did need to get removed in order to sell it. And so that becomes their point of reference. But
Hmm.
what we try to do is say, before we go down that path, because in my opinion, we're throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
Let's stop for a minute and say, what are your utility bills? Do you have anything that you owe on this? Are you upside down on this system? And depending on the answer to those, we'll often say, not too long ago, I said, this is a nice house. You have a zero utility bill. You have just differentiated your house from every house in this neighborhood. And in this case, the lady that installed it had paid it off. So there was nothing owed on it. I said, where do you think the people that are coming to Northwest Arkansas are coming from? Texas, California, New York, Minnesota, Florida. They want clean energy. It's common there. And so we said, instead of removing it and you seen it as an obstacle, let's highlight it, which is your exact point. Let's highlight the benefit of it. I saw the lady actually at a home show about, oh, I don't know, it was 6 months later. She actually stopped by our booth and we got talking about it. And I said, well, did you sell your house? She said, I did. I sold about 30 days after we talked. And so it's all what it's no one's going to tell the story unless you tell it. You got to tell the story, I think, is the point of the conversation.
So now you got me thinking again. I'm going to have one additional follow-up and then we're going to
Yeah.
move on to another section. Those panels, have you ever had to pull panels off of a house? And if so, if they were in good condition, are they reconditioned? Can they be reconditioned? Can they be reused? Or once you pull panels off of a house that they're done?
Yeah, and we do what we call a removal reinstall when there's a hailstorm or someone's got to re-roof their house. That's pretty common. We do it all the time. Work with insurance companies and roofers, make that very seamless for the customer. I think there's a mass market brewing here, and that is what we call reconditioned or reclaimed panels. If Randy, if you went down and you had a nice car and you said, "Hey, I need to put a new alternator or some part for your car," you can go and buy a brand new product, maybe that's of lower quality, or you can buy factory reconditioned product that goes through a rigorous process to test and recondition the entire alternators or water pump or whatever it is that you're buying. And in many cases, those products are equal to or better than the new product. And that is happening in solar. There are panels out there in the marketplace now that are factory reconditioned. They go through a rigorous testing process. They are inspected, they are washed, cleaned, and repackaged. And I like to tell people it's a 20-year panel, not a 30-year.
Hmm.
And so you keep it out of landfill. It's a lower cost. And the reason this makes sense is panels. There's a great study by National Renewable Energy Lab that found that from the year 2000 through the year 2017, the failure rate of a solar panel was about 5 in every 10,000.
Yeah.
So if you find a factory reconditioned panels, the 5 out of 10,000 have already failed. The failure rate of the next round is probably even lower. So it's a great option.
You mentioned this a little earlier in our conversation. I want to come back to this with regard to the influx of solar companies that we saw during the boom time of the solar industry and all of the tax rebates that existed. And so every Tom, Dick, and Harry came out of the woodwork to start offering solar panels, solar services. They were solar companies. Now that things have kind of started to die down from that perspective, you guys have been in business for almost 50 years. That's a long time, right? This is not your first rodeo. You've been doing this. You're a multi-generational company that works in the solar industry. There's something to be said for that, especially with all of, I'm sure you're used to seeing people come and go all the time. What advice would you give to a small business owner that's thinking about solar or a private individual that's thinking about solar but is concerned that, well, there's just no stability in this industry? How do you respond to that, knowing what you know about the industry and what you and your parents have been doing in this space for almost half of a century?
I'm going to go a little bit different direction on this and then I'll come back around. The number one thing, if I was talking to someone who came up to me and said, I want to start a solar company, not be the company getting solar, but I want to start a solar company, I would say the runway in this industry is long and it's going to be very prosperous because energy demand is only going up and we need clean energy. There's plenty of room for all of us. But
Yeah.
for that individual, I would say it's a long game. It's not microwave cooking. This is long-term planning. You've got to grind it out a lot of days, but integrity. You know, it's what you do when people aren't watching. We talked about sports and champions are made in the off season. Man, if you're going to run a business in this industry, you've got to commit to doing it right. Dipping into your back pocket sometimes and fixing problems that frankly weren't your problem, but it's the right thing to do. And then on the flip side, if you're a home or business and you're thinking about solar, we talk about our core values and we talk about how would you want to be treated? If something happened that was not done right and we have to own it, you got to do it the right thing. It's an experience thing, but it's a character and an integrity thing. And I think that's true of everything in life, right? That's what we teach our children. That's what we do with our neighbors, our neighborhoods. We have a saying that if you're walking down the road, you want to see your customers and run to them, not run from them.
Yeah.
And that's indicative of someone who's taking good care of your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you got it honestly, and, from your parents who originally started the company, and you guys it always has appeared to me that you guys have been playing the long game. And that's why you're able to sometimes dip into your pockets to correct things that weren't problems that you initiated. So that speaks volumes to who Stitt Solar is and what you guys are all about. And I certainly encourage anybody listening to this to think long and hard about that when they're choosing a company to work with, because those are the intangibles that you don't always get with different businesses. So I want to certainly applaud you guys for that approach. I want to ask this question because this is kind of the elephant in the room at the present time of recording this, we're having to deal with. And we're calling this section geopolitics versus the sun. And I want to talk about that. How do you deal with solar conversations, especially as it pertains to geopolitical risk? Because we're living in a world where energy costs are tied to things happening on the other side of the planet, right? You got oil embargoes, wars, trade disputes. How does solar insulate people from some of that volatility?
Yeah, you actually sent me an article from PBS, a video. I enjoyed watching that. I'm sure that with our company on next week. But I'm almost at a loss for words. I can't help but think of the disruption around the world that's happening. and I see the black smoke from bombings and oil refineries on fire. And that just breaks my heart because those are environmental effects that are going to affect my children and their children. And to me, that's really hard. I feel like back to this whole premise of base load and small solar arrays and putting them on lots of houses, it's a way of making a large impact in what's a larger problem. But even as I think it was a couple days ago, I think after obviously this conflict in Iran had already started, but all of a sudden the conversation about electric vehicles popped back up
Yeah.
because we all know that conversation kind of waned after those incentives went away and people were like, oh, they're still more expensive. But all of a sudden, well, gas hits $3, $4 a gallon and people are going, hey, maybe I need an EV now. Like, I think people are hungry for stability. We all want something that we can count on that's more stable. And it's not going to come overnight. None of this is going to get solved. But I think wins are, championships are won on RBIs. I think we need a win here and a win there. And over time, the problem will get better. But it's again, it's a plain word, but it's being empowered. People should be empowered to take care of some of the things, whether that's planting a garden or putting a solar array on. I can't help but you and I've talked about this before. How does it make any sense that we harvest energy, call it coal or oil or natural gas, halfway around the world when we can produce it 10 feet above my head
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
consume it and it's clean? But it's a paradigm shift. It forces people to think differently. Now, I'm not naive enough to say that the sunshine 10 feet above my head is going to power my vehicle,
Yeah.
but it will in time. And we have to make progress over time. And that's the thing that we have to take care of our needs today, but we have to plan for tomorrow.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is coming a time, and I don't know when it is. I hope it's in our lifetime that there will be an ability to capture the power of the sun in such a portable format that then that can be applied. Imagine being able to take something from your home and drop it into your car so that you can make that drive to Dallas and from Fayetteville, which is about a 5 hour drive. That's coming whether we like it or not. And I think some of it is that we have to be patient as technologies continue to present themselves, and we have to encourage that development and that research because I think we all as a society benefit from learning how to harness cleaner energy for the whole planet, not just for
Yeah.
Northwest Arkansas.
To be fair, we do this all the time where we put a solar array on a house and we charge a battery or we put that into the car, and effectively that car does drive to Dallas running on sunshine. That is here, that is now, but most people aren't thinking that way. That's the paradigm shift that's got to happen. I was at a show not too long ago and I looked at fuel cells. Today, you can take and produce clean energy and then with that clean energy through a process, produce hydrogen and then use hydrogen on your house. And then the byproduct, the combustion of hydrogen is clean water and air. Now they work today. It's here. It's now. It's expensive, but that's the technology that's going to be there. And if we can all do a little bit every day, we will achieve these goals sooner than if we just keep waiting for the silver bullet, so to speak. We got to do the heavy lifting every day.
Well, we touched upon it earlier, and I want to, before we end, I do want to talk a little bit about the future and some of the next steps that we need to be thinking about. And recently, I heard you talk about this in a talk that SWEPCO's new residential time of use rates, they just became available and they're kind of a game changer. And I think that might be the way you look at this. How do these new rates change the math on batteries and solar for homeowners?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's a proven process and practice all over the country that one of the things utilities are desperately trying to do is shift the load because the load profile for when people want and need energy is not necessarily when the sun's shining. So they're trying to push there's usually excess capacity at night and a shortage of capacity during the day. So one of the things that this new rate plan, and you have to sign up for it and you have to search for it, and it will probably be something similar will be probably adopted by other utilities. But what it allows you to do is go in during what we call off-peak time and put energy into your battery from the grid. So maybe you go to bed at 10 at night, you charge your battery all night long off the grid at a very, very low discounted rate. Then in the morning, the rate goes up and you will discharge your battery or use the sun to charge your battery or offset your consumption. And then there's what's called super peak. And that's the time of day when the electricity is in most demand. And so the utilities are trying to say, please, customers, don't use as much energy during peak times of the year and peak times of the day. They're trying to shift that. So then you program your battery to discharge during super peak time. So charge, call it buy low, and sell and avoid the cost of peak rates. And you want to start running the ROIs on the quality of an investment and the mitigation of risk. Having a battery on that rate plan with a small solar array, it's a game changer. And we go back to this paradigm shift. You haven't taken a baby step there. You've taken 10 steps. You've taken a big leap towards something better. And you're going to see more and more of that coming. It is absolutely the future.
And I know that you're keeping an eye on this. You're going to be taking a closer look at the legislative session that comes up next year. And there's all kinds of different incentives that will probably come down the line. And you guys will be perfectly positioned to help customers make a better decision around their options. But I want to bring this home for the listener who's been on the fence about solar. Maybe they got burned by some of those high pressure sales tactics that we talked about before, or they're worried about making the wrong decision. Solar is rolling out baseload plans for residents, businesses, really anyone paying an electric bill in Northwest Arkansas. What's the one thing that you want them to know after hearing this conversation?
We have a saying around here, learn by asking questions. I want people to ask questions. I want them to learn and understand, is this right for me? How does it work? Why do I want to do this? Because we all make better decisions when we understand the situation. Like we need to give them the information that people need. So investigate, give us a call. We do a lot of site visits and consultations, and we're doing a seminar coming up I think it's in April. And that's the purpose, is to educate the customer and help them to understand how it works, why it's a good investment, and see if it's right for them. Because knowledge is power.
Well, listen, we're going to do something a little different with this episode before we close. I actually have a couple of rapid fire questions that I want to ask you and just get your simple response to it. And we'll share that out to this audience. I think it'll give them a better understanding of the solar industry, as certainly as from how you see it. The first question I have for you is, can solar panels handle Arkansas hail and wind? We've been getting some pretty intense weather events here in Northwest Arkansas. I would just be curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
Solar panels are designed, manufactured, made to be installed all over this planet. Do they ever break? Sure. Occasionally. It's not a normal thing. In fact, there's a very large hailstorm here last year, and there were a lot of roofs replaced. And of all the solar arrays that we removed so that roofs could be re-roofed, I think we had maybe 2 or 3 panels out of that, probably thousands of panels that got replaced.
Wow.
So they're very durable, meant to withstand weather and Mother Nature, and they're good at that.
Okay. And then my second question, which sometimes will line up with that, does insurance cover solar panels? And if so, when you have an incident like what you just described, do premiums typically go up because of that?
Insurance companies do ask that you would add it to your solar array to your insurance policy, whether your home or business. Rates typically do not go up. They just want to know it's there. We work with the roofing companies and the insurance companies, kind of a fixed price per panel, because we're only pulling panels and racking. We're not getting into other wiring and inverters and other things. So it's a pretty seamless process. And the insurance companies have been very good to work with on it.
Yeah. Well, David, I really appreciate this. If anybody listening to this wants to learn more about you and about the work that you're doing, how best can they contact you?
The best thing is go to our website, thestittgroup.com.
Yeah.
There's actually 2 pages there. You can go to the Stitt Group, and then there's Stitt Solar on that same. You can navigate to either site there, but stittgroup.com. We have a number. You can Google us, find us online. Yeah, it just occurred to me, and I want to say this too. The building that I'm in right now is 99.9% operates off the sun. Everything, this computer, this camera, this podcast, the lights you see in the background, it's all coming from the sun and the battery. So this is proof that the systems work, and it was produced 10 feet above my head.
Do you ever invite people into your space to see it?
We
Okay,
love doing
awesome.
that. And
Okay.
we've even had cases where we'll have an event here and someone will go and throw the breaker
Yeah,
and the lights don't even flicker. It
that's
just the battery picks
hilarious.
up and we store it in the battery and discharge. And it's pretty fun. People, so seamless, people don't believe it.
Man, that's called believing what you sell. That's for sure. So I appreciate you sharing that. David, thanks again for another super informative episode. And those of you that hung with us till the end, I hope this was helpful for you. I really want to encourage you to continue listening to Stitt Happens. It's a very informative podcast that will enlighten you about the solar industry and specifically about how it applies here in Northwest Arkansas, and also to learn more about the Stitt Group and Stitt Solar. These guys have been around, as I said, for almost half a century. And that should mean something in this day and age where, you see companies opening and closing left and right. David and his parents have been doing really good work here in Northwest Arkansas. So I really want to encourage you to check them out. But thanks again, David, for joining us today.
Thank you. I always enjoy time with you and it's good conversation and look forward to the next one.
Well, folks, that was David Stitt, CEO of the Stitt Group and Stitt Solar. If you take one thing away from this episode, I hope it's this: solar isn't an all or nothing proposition anymore. You don't have to cover 100% of your energy needs on day one. You can start small, cover your base load, lock in savings, and expand over time as your needs change and as policy evolves. And here's the bigger picture: while fossil fuel prices swing with geopolitics, trade wars, and global instability, the sun shows up every single day. That's the kind of energy independence that makes sense in an uncertain world. So, listen, I really want to encourage you to keep going. If you're thinking about solar or if you've been burned before and want to give it another look, visit stittsolar.com, STITT solar.com. Check out their solar site evaluation tool and see what's possible for your home or business. Thanks for listening to Stitt Happens. We'll see you back here with another new episode soon. Take care.